let's start our calculation with concrete work in staircase. So we'll calculate for the concrete work in footing, we'll calculate for the concrete work in step, we'll calculate for the concrete work in landing, we'll calculate for the concrete work in waist. You understand? So that is all what we need to calculate for. Now, if we want to calculate for the concrete work in footing, this is our footing details. We say 900 by 450 mm multiplied by the width of our staircase. It will now go like this. It will go like this, 1.0 by 0.9 by 0.45. So that will give us in meter cube. So it is the same thing as 1.0 times 0.9 multiplied by 0.45. So it gives us 0.41 meter cube. Now we will calculate concrete in step also. And we have how many steps? Number of steps equals 22. So if we deduct the landing part from the total steps we have in our details, like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, this is landing, and 13 to 22. But we want to calculate for all these steps. You see, as you can see in this section, all these steps, we will not consider this. We will calculate for this separately because this is the landing. So now this is how we will do it. So as we all know, this is riser and it is at 150 mm, and this is thread which is at 300. So we will now say, let's assume we draw an imaginary line here like this. So which means the width of our stair will now come like this. It will now go like this, as you can see. So it means from here to here it is 1.0 meter. From here to here. So our calculation will now come like this. We will have 1.0 multiplied by 0.3 multiplied by 0.15 by 1/2. Or you say 1.0 multiplied by 0.3 multiplied by 0.15 divided by 2, which means we are only calculating for the half of this square shape. So we'll calculate for this alone, not this part, but we just use this square shape to get our calculation first, then divide it by 2. So basically we'll say 1.0 times 0.3 multiplied by 0.15 will give us this by half, divided by 2 will now give us this. If it's now 0.23, we will now multiply it by 21 steps, the total number of steps we have, which will now give us 0.48 meter cube. So that is for the concrete in steps. For the concrete in landing, the length of our landing is 2001, while the width is 1002, and the thickness is 150 mm. So we will now say 2.10 by 1.20 by 0.15. So that will give us 0.38 meter cube. So the next is now concrete in waist. So to calculate the concrete in waist, this is our waist, and also this is our waist. So the length from here to here and the length from here to here. So let's say this is the first flight and this one is the second flight. Let us now take it out and see the length of each flight. So we'll use that to calculate for the concrete in waist. Looking at these details, this is the first flight while this one is the second flight. The hypotenuse is not known yet, which is the waist of our staircase. This is the waist. So the distance between here and here is 3,300 as it is shown in the details of our staircase. This is it. And for the second flight is 3,000 mm. If we want to get the height from here to this place, you will multiply the riser multiplied by the number of steps in this first flight, which will give us 150 multiplied by 11 steps will give us 1650. Same thing for the second flight. We have total number of 10 steps in the second flight. We will now say 150 multiplied by 10, it will give us 1500. So following the Pythagoras rule, which says hypotenuse square will now be equals to opposite square plus adjacent square, which will give us 1.65 square plus 3.3 square. So if you do all the math, the length of our waist will now be 3.69. The same thing will now go for the second flight, using this and this to get this. So the calculations will now be like this. So if we now want to calculate for the concrete in the waist, we will now say this 3.69 multiplied by the width of the staircase 1.0 multiplied by the thickness, which is 0.15, which will now give us the same thing. Will go for this. So it will now give us, for the first flight, 0.55 meter cube. For the second flight, it will give us 0.5 meter cube. So let us add all the volume together.